Your ticket was canceled, said at the airport. Later, I received SMS. We don't need you, wrote Stepmom. I called my dad, but he didn't answer. A week later, when they returned, I could already picture the warm beaches, the sound of the ocean, and a week without worrying about bills or work. My dad had invited me on this trip to Hawaii, and for the first time in a long time, I actually felt like things might be getting better between us. I showed up at the airport, walked up to the check-in counter, handed over my ID, and waited for my boarding pass. The lady behind the counter frowned at her screen, typed something, and then looked at me. Your ticket has been canceled. I let out a short laugh. That must be a mistake. My dad booked it. She checked again. No, it was canceled this morning. You'll have to talk to the person who booked it. I stepped back, my mind racing. My first thought was that there had to be some kind of mix-up. Maybe my father had rebooked me on another flight. Maybe there was a scheduling problem. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. From Melissa. We don't need you. She wrote, enjoy your little apartment. I just stared at the screen. It didn't make any sense. My heart was pounding and my fingers felt numb. I hit call. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I tried texting my dad. Call me. What's up? Nothing. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. They had planned this. Melissa never wanted me there. She just had my dad invite me. Probably just to mess with me. And my dad? He let it happen. He had booked me a ticket, promised me a trip, and then just like that allowed her to take it away. I turned and walked out of the airport, my head spinning. A mixture of anger, humiliation, and disbelief washed over me all at once. I thought about the last few years. Since my dad had married Melissa, things had gone downhill fast. She had 2 children, 9-year-old twins, Max and Jake. And from the moment they moved in, my life had changed. At first, I tried to be civil. I wanted to make it work. But Melissa made sure I was nothing more than free labor in my own home. If she needed someone to watch the kids, that was my job. If they made a mess, I had to clean it up. And if I said no, I was ungrateful, selfish, or lazy. Every little thing turned into a fight, and my father always took their side. I tried to hold on for a while, thinking maybe things would calm down. But they didn't. It just got worse. As soon as I could afford it, I moved to a small, crappy apartment across town. It wasn't much, but at least it was mine. The only person I kept in touch with was my father. Melissa acted like I didn't exist except when she needed me to watch the twins. Then suddenly I was part of the family. Again, and now this. They made me believe things would get better. They made me think just for a second that maybe I still mattered to my dad. Then they ripped it all away just to watch me fall. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Melissa. Stop calling. Dad's busy. Move on. I gritted my teeth and shoved the phone into my pocket. They thought I was useless now. That's why they did this. They didn't need me for anything right now, so they threw me away like garbage. But they would need me again. They always did, and I would be ready. I sat in the back of the cab, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles were white. The driver looked at me in the mirror, but didn't say anything. He was probably used to seeing angry passengers. I couldn't believe it. They had actually done this to me. My dad had let this happen. I pulled out my phone again and stared at the latest message from Melissa. We don't need you. Enjoy your little apartment. The words were burned into my brain. I wanted to call again to demand an explanation, but I knew I wouldn't get one. If my father had wanted to explain, he would have picked up the phone. Instead, he let her do it. I wasn't even worth talking to. The anger in my chest only grew. I thought about how many times I had helped them, how many times they had dumped Max and Jake on me, expecting me to drop everything. They always made it seem like I had no choice, like I owed them. But now, suddenly, I was nothing to them. I looked out the window, barely paying attention to where the cab was taking me. I had just enough money to get home, and the thought of walking into my tiny apartment alone, broke and betrayed, made me sick. I thought of all the times Melissa had used me, like when she and my dad wanted to go on a date, and she called me, pretending to be nice. Oh, Alan, we'd love for you to spend some time with your brothers. Brothers? That's what she called them, as if we were actually related. And if I said no, then I got the guilt trip. Your dad works so hard for you, and you can't even do this one thing for him? Every time I gave in, because I didn't want to be the bad guy. Because I thought if I just went along with it, maybe things would get better. What a joke. By the time the cab pulled up to my apartment, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to beg for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to answer when Melissa called. And when not if they needed something from me again, I wasn't going to be there. I slammed the door behind me and threw my bag on the couch. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of my refrigerator. Then I smiled to myself. Melissa thought she had won. She thought she had finally shut me out for good. But I knew her. They were going to Hawaii, spending money they didn't have, pretending to be a perfect, happy family. But eventually reality would set in. And when it did, I want to be there to watch them fall. So I waited. A week passed. I went to work, kept my phone on silent, and ignored the tiny glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, my dad would reach out. He didn't. Then on the 10th day, my phone buzzed. Melissa's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. She called again. Then a third time. Then my dad's name came up. I took a deep breath before I answered. Alan, my dad said. His voice sounded distant. Worried. We need to talk. I leaned back against the couch, letting the silence stretch. My dad had finally called. A week ago, they had dumped me like trash. Now suddenly, they needed to talk? I wasn't about to make this easy for him. What's up? I asked, keeping my voice flat. There was a pause. Listen, son. We have a bit of problem. I almost laughed. Of course they did. Yeah, he sighed. Can you come by the house? It's important. I had half a mind to tell him to screw off, but something in his voice made me curious. This wasn't just them calling to pretend to care. Something was wrong. Fine, I said. I'll be there in an hour. I hung up before he could say anything else. When I pulled up to the house, the first thing I noticed was how messy it looked. The curtains were drawn, and the lawn was overgrown, like no one had touched it in weeks. That was strange. Melissa ran this house like a dictator. Everything had to be spotless. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Finally, the door cracked open, and Melissa stood there. But she didn't look like herself. Her hair was a mess, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. For the first time ever, she actually looked tired. Come in, she muttered, stepping aside. Inside, the house was a disaster. Dishes piled up in the sink, toys scattered everywhere, and a weird smell lingered in the air. It was nothing like the spotless home I remembered. I turned to my dad, who was sitting at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples. He looked years older than when I last saw him. All right, I said, crossing my arms. What's this about? Dad glanced at Melissa, and she sighed heavily before speaking. We got robbed. I raised an eyebrow. Robbed? She nodded. Someone broke in while we were in Hawaii. Took cash, jewelry, and my phone. I frowned. Why was there cash in the house? Dad let out a long breath. We were keeping some aside. A lot, actually, for bills. And now it's gone. I almost laughed. They had money problems before, but this was next level. That sucks, I said, shrugging. What do you want me to do about it? Melissa narrowed her eyes. You could show some sympathy. I gave her a look. Sympathy? After what they did to me. Did you call the cops? I asked. Dad nodded. Yeah, but there's not much they can do. No cameras, no witnesses. We're screwed. Melissa took a deep breath and folded her arms. We need help, Alan. I waited, letting the silence hang in the air. Then it clicked. They weren't just telling me this for fun. They were asking for money. A week ago, I wasn't even worth a damn plane ticket. Now, they were looking at me like I was their last hope. Unbelievable. I let out a short laugh. You're serious? After everything, you're coming to me for money? Dad shifted in his seat, avoiding my eyes. Melissa clenched her jaw. Look, we wouldn't be asking if we had another option. Well, you do, I said. Get jobs. Melissa's face turned red. You little. Dad put a hand on her arm, stopping her. Alan, please. We're in a tough spot. I just stared at them. This was karma punching them right in the face. I could have left right then and there. I should have. But something in me wanted to see just how desperate they'd get. So, I kept my expression neutral and said, I'll think about it. Melissa exhaled sharply, like she wanted to scream at me. Dad just nodded, probably relieved that I didn't say no outright. Fine, Melissa snapped. But don't take too long. We don't have time to waste. I smirked. Oh, this was going to be fun. I walked out of their house with a grin I couldn't hide. Melissa looked like she wanted to throw something at my head and my dad. Well, he was too tired to even argue. They were desperate, and I wasn't going to make this easy for them. I took my time thinking about it. A day passed, then another. I ignored their texts, let their calls go to voicemail. If they were struggling good, let them sweat. Then, on the third day, something unexpected happened. I got home for work late, grabbed some takeout on the way, and was just about to dig in when there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked my phone. No missed calls. Another knock. Louder. I sighed, got up, and opened the door. It was my dad, and he looked bad. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his face was pale like he hadn't slept in days. I'd never seen him like this before. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped aside, still trying to process the fact that he was actually here. He walked in, glanced around my tiny apartment, and sat down on the couch. He didn't say anything at first, just rubbed his hands together, like he was working up to something. Dad, what was going on? I finally asked. He let out a slow breath. I lost my job. That caught me off guard. You what? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Got back from Hawaii, went in the next day, and they let me go. Cutbacks. I blinked. So, wait, you came to me for money knowing you were already broke. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I let out a short laugh. Wow, so you guys went to Hawaii knowing you couldn't afford it, and now you expect me to clean up the mess? His face twisted. Melissa didn't know. I frowned. What? He sighed. I didn't tell her. I don't know. I thought I could figure something out when we got back. But now, with the robbery and everything else, we're screwed. I sat back, letting that sink in. So not only was Melissa panicking about the robbery, but she didn't even know that my dad had lost his job. This just kept getting better and better. So what do you want from me? I asked, crossing my arms. He hesitated, just a loan, to keep things steady for a while, until I find something else. I tilted my head. And Melissa? She know you're here? He looked down. No. I stared at him, almost impressed. The same man who had let Melissa control everything was now sneaking behind her back to ask me for help. And he didn't even realize how pathetic that was. I let out a breath and stood up. Look, Dad, I don't have the money to bail you out. That was a lie. I did have some savings, but there was no way in hell I was giving him a cent. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, he actually looked ashamed. I get it. I'll walk him to the door. Good luck, I said. He gave me a small nod, then left without another word. As soon as he was gone, I grabbed my phone and waited, because I knew one thing for sure. Melissa was going to find out, and when she did, it was going to be glorious. I barely had time to grab my morning coffee before my phone exploded with notifications. 10 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and an angry text from Melissa. You think you're smart? Huh? You think you can play games with us? You have no idea what you've done. I smirked. Oh, this was going to be good. I took my time, made breakfast, and finally hit play on the first voicemail. At first, all I could hear was static and heavy breathing. Then Melissa's voice came through, shaking with anger. You think this is funny? Your father lied to me. I just found out he lost his damn job, and now we have nothing. Nothing, Ellen. And you knew, didn't you? You let me beg you for money while you sat there laughing. I actually laughed out loud. That was better than I expected. I played the second voicemail. You're a selfish little bastard. After all we did for you. I skipped the rest. Then the third voicemail. This time it was my dad. His voice was quiet. Tired. Alan, I don't know what to say. Melissa is angry. She left. I froze. What? I played the message back to make sure I heard it right. Melissa left? That wasn't part of the plan. I expected her to yell at me, threaten me, maybe even show up at my door with more demands. But leaving? I never thought she'd actually leave. I called my dad back, and he picked up right away. It's over, he said. What do you mean? He sighed, sounding like he hadn't slept all night. She packed a bag, took the twins, said she's staying with her sister. I don't know if she's coming back. I stared at the wall, trying to process. Melissa was gone. I wasn't sure how I should feel. On the one hand, it was exactly what she deserved. She had spent years making my life miserable, turning my dad against me, using me like a free babysitter. Now she had nothing. But on the other hand, this wasn't just a tantrum. She really left. What are you going to do? I asked. Dad took a slow, shaky breath. I don't know. For the first time in years, he sounded completely lost. No Melissa to boss him around. No twins to take care of. No family under his roof. Just him. Alone. In that big, messy house. And me? I didn't feel sorry for him. Not even a little. That was the mess he made. And now, he was finally going to live in it. Over the next few days, I expected Melissa to call again. Maybe to yell, maybe to demand that I fix what I started. Maybe to gloat that she and my dad were back together and I was still the villain in her story. But she didn't. Instead, my dad kept calling. I ignored the first few, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. When I finally answered, he sounded different. Not angry. Not desperate. Just empty. Hey, Alan, he said, his voice hollow. Can we talk? I hesitated, but sighed. Yeah, sure. He asked me to meet him at a diner near my place. That was weird. He never came to my side of town. When I got there, he was already sitting in a booth, stirring a cup of coffee, staring at nothing. He looked exhausted, like he had aged 10 years in a week. I slid into the seat across from him. All right, what's up? He rubbed his face and took a long breath. Melissa's not coming back. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She's done. I talked to her last night, and she said she's moving out for good. She's taking the kids too. I blinked. Melissa actually left him. I mean, I knew they were a mess. I knew she was angry when she found out about the job and the money, but I figured she'd come crawling back once she realized she couldn't support herself. But no, she was really gone. And for the first time, my dad had no one. I watched him for a moment. He wasn't the same man who used to blindly defend her. He looked completely lost. So, I said carefully, "What do you want from me?" He gave a small, sad smile. Nothing. I didn't believe him. Come on, Dad. Every time you call, you want something. But he shook his head. Not this time. He looked down at his coffee, as if he didn't know how to say what he was thinking. Then he sighed. I screwed up, Alan. I didn't say anything. I let her control everything. He admitted. I let her push you out of the family, and I just let it happen. He looked up at me, guilt written all over his face. And now I don't have a family anymore. I swallowed, taken completely by surprise. My dad wasn't the type to admit things. He never owned up to anything. He always found a way to pass the buck. But now he actually said it. He knew he screwed up. I should have been satisfied. That was what I wanted, right? For him to realize how much he hurt me. But instead, I just felt strange. You made your choice, I finally said. You let them treat me like garbage for years, Dad. I tried. I really did. But you always supported her. He nodded slowly, as if he already knew what I was going to say. I know, and I'm sorry. I sat back and stared at him. The man who had always chosen her over me. The man who had let me walk away without a second thought. And now he was here, alone, apologizing. I didn't know what to do. I expected a fight. I expected him to argue, to beg, to apologize. But instead, He just sat there defeated. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father not as a towering figure in control, but as a man who had lost everything. And somehow that was worse. Time passed. My dad and I weren't exactly close, but things had changed. He was still struggling, still trying to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. And somehow I was still there to watch. Then one night, I got a call from him. It was late, too late for a casual conversation. I hesitated, but answered anyway. Dad? He sounded completely exhausted. She says she's pregnant. I sat up. What? Melissa, he mumbled. She called me today. Said she's pregnant. I almost laughed. Are you kidding me? No, he said, sounding just as tired as before. And she's already talking about child support. I rubbed my temple. Of course she was. Is there any proof? I asked. He hesitated. No, she just said it. Said she found out after she left. But she won't show me anything. No ultrasound, no tests, nothing. I sat back. This was classic Melissa. She must have realized she wasn't going to get a dime out of him. So she pulled out her desperate card. You know she's lying, right? I said. He let out a shaky breath. I don't know any more, Ellen. That took me by surprise. I had never heard my father sound so broken. Melissa had taken everything from him, his money, his house, his pride. And now she was coming back for what little control she had left. And for some reason, I actually felt sorry for him. After everything he'd done to me, after years of putting her before me, I still couldn't ignore him. Because no matter what, he was still my father. And he was finally seeing her for who she really was. I let out a long sigh. All right, I said. We'll figure this out. He was silent for a second. Then he said, we? I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure why I was saying it. But yes, we. Maybe I was stupid. Maybe I was soft. Maybe I just wasn't ready to see him get crushed again. All I knew was that for the first time in a long time, my dad actually needed me. And this time, I wasn't going to walk away.